Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode. I'm so excited to have you here. Today, we have a very important topic. We are starting out the new year. If you're listening to this later, it's the beginning of 2025, and this year, you're going to go after your dreams. I know it. You have big dreams. You want to write the book, start the business, start the podcast. I don't know, become a painter. Who cares? All of you have something you want to do. And so many of you don't start it because of this pesky little thought. What if I fail? Oh my God. Dun, dun, dun. But what if it doesn't work? I hear this all the time. What am I going to do if it doesn't work? Now, the fear of failure is very real and for very good reason. And we're going to talk about it today because this should not be the thing that stops you. And in fact, I just want you to think about it completely different. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Help. What if I fail? Here is the thing. Your fear of failure is actually let's talk about like the benefit of it, okay? It is good that you have critical thinking skills and that you are looking at what could go wrong. Your brain was developed in order to keep you alive, not to keep you happy, right? So you were not just like la 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 frolicking without like checking both sides of the street. We're constantly looking at like what could go wrong, which is a good thing. And historically did keep us alive. Now, it has become overblown because we are not at risk of dying all the time. But for a lot of us, the feeling of failing feels as though we're going to die, right? It truly feels as though like this is the end of my life. And again, for good reason, I think that we are all like tribal beings, and we've been taught from very early on that the worst thing you can do is fail. And we get these messages both in subtle and not so subtle ways, right? So we all know that like we were raised in school systems where the goal was to get as close to perfect as possible, and failing, getting an F, was the worst thing that could happen. And it was never like, looking at sort of why that happened. It's almost like you're a failure. Like there's something wrong with you. You're not smart enough. You couldn't figure it out. And so we all learned very quickly to like just mimic what other people did, memorize, get as close to 100, and you want to try to avoid failure as much as possible, right? We also got these messages in really subtle ways. So oftentimes from people that loved you, that wanted to quote unquote protect you. They didn't want you to feel the negative emotion of embarrassment, of what failure brings, judgment, rejection, whatever it is. And so let's say you were trying out for the soccer team and you didn't make it, and you wanted to try out again next year. Your parents might have been like, you know what, maybe we try something else. Like maybe soccer's not your thing. Maybe we go for baseball, or you're not really the most coordinated. Why don't we try art? Or you could try theater. Or you get it. Now, they meant well. Obviously, they just wanted to prevent heartbreak for you. But the message that we get is like, don't do anything you're not good at. Only stick to the things that you are good at, and make sure that you're good at it kind of from the beginning. Otherwise, you should give up and should try something else. Clearly, that's not the message they wanted to send. Obviously, they don't want their kids to think that. But we do get that message where it's like, go towards the thing you are naturally good at. And so for a lot of us, we find ourselves more and more kind of contained in this box of what we're allowed to, quote unquote, do, what is going to make us successful, what we're good at. And we don't try new things. We don't, let ourselves explore. We don't let ourselves like take a shot because we're so terrified of what's going to happen if we fail. Okay? And if that thought comes up to you, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to answer, what would happen? I want you to answer that question. What happens with your brain is that oftentimes you will ask yourself these questions that go unanswered. They kind of become these rhetorical questions that just spin on loop in your mind. So like whenever people come to me and they say like, but what if I fail at this? The first thing I ask is like, what would you do? And usually people get stunned. They're like, because they didn't really like want to think of the answer. But oftentimes the answer is very simple and very clear, right? And I want you to really think about like, what is that worst case scenario for you? Know what it is. Most of the times it's just a feeling. That's all it is. It's like, I would feel embarrassed because let's say you want to try your hand at being an influencer. You're going to put your stuff on TikTok or Instagram, or you want to try your hand at entrepreneurship. You're going to launch that business. And you're not really putting much capital into it. It's not like you're going to lose a ton of things. You're doing it on the side. It's not like you're quitting your job. The real ramifications of like what happens if I fail, which we're going to get to, like what even is a failure later, but like let's just go there. Let's not argue with your brain, and let's give your brain what, the dreaded thing that it thinks is going to happen. I want you to like go to that worst case scenario. What's happening? Like what is the real consequence of you trying? I would venture to guess that 90% of the time it's just an emotion. That's all it is. I would feel embarrassed. I would feel ashamed. I would feel judged. I would feel silly or stupid that I thought I could do this. I would feel bad about myself, right? That's what we are so afraid. I sort of want to pause there because actually this is like very, for lack of a better word, profound. It's something that's so pivotal that I want everybody to like truly hear me. Most of you are not going after your dreams, or are not trying new things, or are not letting yourself live the most, expanded big life that you can have because you are afraid of feeling a feeling. That's it. That's what you're so afraid of. And the thing is you've felt all of your feelings and you've survived. You can handle feeling a feeling. And if you learn how to actually process the feeling and not like make it mean anything about you, it's not that hard to feel that feeling. But you have to really know, like, okay, the best case is that I have a business, or I become an influencer, or I go after my dream, or I create a new life for myself, and I meet all these new people, and I grow and I learn, and there's all this stuff that can come from it. The worst case is that I have to feel a little embarrassed, or I have to feel a little judged, or I have to feel some shame. Can I do that? Now, let's say there's even a bigger consequence than shame. Okay, what is it? Like, really know. For some of my clients who come to me who are going to like quit their job, or they're going to go after some dream, or they're going to try to get a new job, they really ask, like, the question might be like, what if I regret it? And it's really, or like, what if it doesn't work out the way that I want? What if I go and that failure looks like I go to the next job and it's not what I want it to be? Or I try the business and the business doesn't work. And again, I ask, like, yeah, what would you do? And maybe in that situation, like, there is the shame and there is the embarrassment or whatnot, but it's really like, okay, well, now I've given up this job, or I don't have an income. And I ask them, like, what would you do if that happened? And instantly they know, well, I'd get another job, or, I would downsize my life. I would move back in with my parents. I would, whatever the strategy would be, if I had to deal with, let's say I lose a little bit of money. Well, I had it in savings. Like, it's fine. They start realizing, like, it's actually not that big of a deal. I could fail and be okay. The reason most of us are so, again, avoidant of failing is simply because what we make it mean about ourselves. So for a lot of us, we are so worried that it is going to confirm the biggest insecurity we have, or the worst thing that we think about ourselves. Right? If I try and I do this and I fail, then it might confirm the thought that I have that I'm just not good enough, that I'm just not smart enough, that I'm never going to amount to anything, that whatever that fear is for you. And so for so many of us, we think like, I would rather not know. I'd rather not be judged. I'd rather not like confirm that. So I'm not going to try to do anything. I'm not going to go after anything. I'm not going to let myself it gets so bad that it's not even about going after like big things like changing jobs and stuff. We won't even let ourselves try a new hobby. I won't go to a dance class because I'm afraid I'm going to look dumb if I fail, quote unquote, at that, class, if I'm not good at it. Like, that fear of failure stops us from trying anything that is outside of this like little box of our comfort zone, which tends to not be very comfortable because we are unfulfilled and restless and bored and, all these other things because we don't let ourselves try anything. And so I want you to like first answer that question so you can really see like, what are the ramifications of if I try this and fail? What am I so scared of happening? Could I handle that? What would I do if that happened? And then I want you to really like think about, what do I make that failure mean about me? That's what I'm really worried about, is what I'm going to make it mean about me. I tell this story. I've told this story for a couple of years now. It's been a couple of years. When my niece was 12 or 13, she was in swim class, and she was on a swim team, and she would cry and have anxiety before every swim match or even her practices. And it was like this very strange thing. And her parents kept asking her, like, do you want to quit? You don't have to do swim. Like, they didn't really care. Nobody could really understand, like, why she was having such a reaction, like, why she was so upset. She was insistent on going. And then she would have these, like, reactions. And so at one point, like, I had been talking to her for a while about this, and she was having this reaction. And I was asking her, like, why is this such a big deal to you? Like, why don't you just stop going if you don't like it this much? Because she was saying she was very adamant about the fact that she just didn't like swim team, but she wouldn't quit. And it turns out my niece had been very successful in gymnastics, had been very good in gymnastics, and had been on a gymnastics team from like when she was 4 years old, and had done really well until like when she was 9 or 10, she hurt her leg to the point where she couldn't do gymnastics anymore. So she had to give up gymnastics. And then the next year she tried basketball, and she didn't like basketball. And so she quit that. And so she told me, like, I quit gymnastics and I quit basketball. If I quit swimming, then I'm just a failure. And it was so profound for me in that moment, like to sit there and look at a 12-year-old who is talking about a sport that literally means nothing, that she will likely not move on, to do any of these sports kind of later on in her life, that was meant for fun, that was meant to bring joy. And she had somehow gotten the message that starting and stopping something, or deciding something is not for you, or doing something and being bad at it and deciding I don't want to do it anymore, somehow meant that she was a failure as a person. Now, obviously I talked to her about it, about how insane of a thought that is, and how she could try every single sport, because how could she know? Like, doing basketball won't tell you if you're going to like swimming or whether you're going to be good at it. Or doing swimming isn't going to tell you whether you're going to like tennis. Like, you truly just have to try these things to figure out what works for you and what doesn't, right? And so when you've just created this meaning out of thin air, you just decided that because I've tried 2 sports, this third sport, that's it. If I quit this one, if I fail at this, then that just means I'm a failure. You've created this rigid rule in your life that is going to dictate so much of what you do and what you don't do, right? So much of what you allow yourself, so much of the opportunity that you give yourself. And this was coming from a 12-year-old who, by the way, whose parents didn't care. Like, if it was parents that were like, you need to be on the swim team, and you need, like, if I had seen her parents and I was like, oh yeah, like there's a lot of pressure there, maybe. But I'm like, you don't even have that. Your parents truly were like begging her at that point to be like, just stop. Nobody cares except for her. And when I look at that and I think about so many of us that have had decades more of that programming, right? Through school and college and grad school and the workplace and all of these things about like, well, you've left 2 jobs now. If you leave another one, what does that say about you? If you try this business and it doesn't work, what does that say about you? You've had this idea that you tried and that didn't work, so you're going to try something else. What does that say about you? Nothing. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't have to mean anything. It can mean that you try things until you figure out what works for you. It means that you give yourself enough freedom to try as many things as you want. It means that you're privileged enough to be able to experiment. How wonderful. And yet, for so many of us, we create these cages, like these handcuffs for ourselves of like, well, if I fail at this, that's it. That just means that I'm terrible and I'm stupid and I'm dumb and I'm never going to amount to anything and I don't stick to things. It's like, why make it mean that? Why is that true? How is that not true? How is there so much evidence to the contrary of that? Why are you looking at this one example and making it mean your whole personality? And so I want you to get really careful about like the reason you're so scared of failure is because of what you're making it mean about you. And you don't have to make it mean that. And here's the real crux of it, like the thing that I want you to take away, is that there is no learning, there is no success without failing. This is like the craziness of this kind of catch-22 that we've put on ourselves, is that like you cannot succeed without failing, and yet you won't let yourself fail. So you also can't succeed, right? If you look at people, nobody in the history of the world has done anything that is worth noting without failing. If you think of yourself, you think of babies, if a kid's like, I tried to walk, I fell. It's not for me. I just don't know what I'm doing. Everyone's going to judge me. It's wild, right? Like if you think about riding a bike, if you were like, I'm going to try this bike, but if I fall, that's it. Can't learn. It just means I'm dumb. No, right? Luckily, kids don't have these types of thought processes yet. So they realize like, I just have to keep failing. I have to keep falling, which is a failure, to learn like this is how I balance. This is what I have to do. This is how fast I have to pedal. That is how I learn everything. It is the same thing with literally anything else. Every failure is, and I'm not trying to make it this like, Instagrammable moment, like your failure is what you learn from. It truly is how you learn. I think about like everyone, like I look at like right now in business, it's like nobody's just born knowing how to run a business. So you have to try things. And as you try things, like the more things you try, some are going to work and some aren't. Now you can make that mean that you're not a good business person, or you can make it, or you can learn from it. You can decide like, I wonder why that didn't work. I was actually just talking to my husband about this because we were talking about venture capital and like private equity. And we were talking about these companies who are like $100 million, $200 million companies who are losing money every year, right? And I was thinking about the mindset that it would take to do that because like, so many people would try something and then if they aren't making the money or they're losing money or if they have debt or whatnot, it's like they make that a sign of like, this means I don't know what I'm doing or I'm not good at this or whatnot. And I'm like, it's fascinating because none of these VCs are like, they might invest in 10 companies and 9 of them don't go anywhere and one of them skyrockets. And they don't think like, I'm such a failure. I don't know what I'm doing. They learn from each one, right? It's like, okay, well, this is the game. I'm sort of learning like, where does it work? What kind of team do we need in place? What metrics do we look at? How do we start figuring out this game in order to win more and more and more? And so you get to decide what you make that failure mean. You get to decide, like, I love the phrase, it's like, I either got the result I wanted or the lesson I needed. When you start looking at failure like that, when you think like, okay, either it works out, great, and I get that result I want. If not, there was something for me to learn here. I did this because it's going to teach me something. And I think like as you go through these failures, I don't know, I look back at my life and it's like most of my learning came from things that I failed at. Most of my learning came from things that didn't go the way I wanted, right? That's what has molded me into the person I am, into my views, into like seeing, into humility, into seeing my humanness, is noticing like things that didn't work out the way they were supposed to work out. And so I invite you to really question like, why am I so afraid of something not working out? If it simply will teach me the thing that I want to do next, maybe, or a lesson that will help me get there. And when you look at your life like that, it makes taking risks so much easier. Because again, not to say that they can't be calculated, but oftentimes I find that like the risk that you're taking is actually not that big. Like you could handle whatever happens. Like let's say the business doesn't work, you could get a job, or, the investment you want to make, like if you're not putting in that much money, it's like, let's say it doesn't even work. Okay, but I might learn a lot about investing, or the new job I want to take, if I don't like it, I can get another job. If I like allow myself to just be a human and learn from it, right? To know that like I don't have to make the perfect decision and I don't have to be perfect at it and I don't have to always win and I don't have to always, be a success in order to be worthy, in order to be okay. I know for me, I say this as somebody who was a perfectionist, who had gotten straight A's my whole life, who had sort of checked all the boxes and did all the winning, in school. And I think about, where did that get me? It got me to a career that I didn't want. I became a lawyer and I was miserable because I only followed the things that I was sort of good at and I didn't really question anything. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep sort of succeeding until I got to the place and I was like, oh, I didn't even like really look up once to think like, what do I want for my life? It's not this. It's not this. So yeah, you can keep succeeding. And I think for a lot of us, like you can keep doing the things you're just good at and never do anything else, but you're likely going to find yourself in a place that's very unfulfilled because humans crave growth. We crave new things. We are curious animals inherently. And for so many of us, because we've locked ourselves in these like cages of perfectionism and doing things right always, we don't allow ourselves to try things because we're so terrified of like, oh God, what if I fail? And so if that's you, my answer to like, help, what if I fail is, yeah, what if you do? You should go out there, go fail, go keep failing, learn, let yourself be, grow from it, use it as a stepping stone, explore, like liberate yourself. Like there's so much becomes available to you, so many possibilities, so much opportunity when you are okay with the fact of like, I might be a little embarrassed. I might have to feel a little bit of sadness. I might be disappointed. I might have to lose a little bit, and I will win in the long run because I will let myself go after all of these dreams I have hidden inside. So go forth and fail, my friends. That's the answer. Like, it truly is one of the like most liberating things you can do for yourself is learning to allow yourself to not be good at everything, to not win all the time, to try things and it not go the way you want, and then learn from it and pivot and try again. It opens up an entire world to you, and I want that world for you. So in 2025, make that your goal. Set 10 ways that you're going to fail this year and see how much of your life can change by putting yourself out there in order to do that. And if you want help with that, you can join me in the Quitter Club. You can go to quitterclub.com. That is my membership where I help people work through things like this and figure out what they want to do and actually go for it. I would love to help you in there. All right, my friends, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next week for another episode.